For 20 years, she'd been quietly teaching young people about history, never talking about her own past, never mentioning where she'd learned to explain war crimes with such painful accuracy, until artificial intelligence discovered she was the prosecutor who had convicted war criminals at the International Criminal Tribunal and helped shape modern international justice. Welcome to AI Human Stories. Before we dive into this incredible tale of justice, education, and how technology uncovered a legendary international prosecutor hiding behind a teacher's desk, tell me in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe history's lessons must be taught by those who helped write them, hit that subscribe button. Lincoln High School in Seattle had a reputation for strong humanities programs, and at the center of that reputation was Miss Elena Kovač, who'd been teaching European history and international relations for 20 years. 58 years old, always professional, with an accent that students couldn't quite place, somewhere Eastern European, but she'd deflect questions about it with a smile and redirect to the lesson. What made Miss Kovač exceptional wasn't just her knowledge of 20th century European conflicts, it was how she taught them. She didn't present history as abstract events in textbooks, she taught it as human stories with real consequences, ethical dilemmas with no easy answers. When we study the Balkans conflicts of the 1990s, she'd tell her students, we're not just learning dates and names, we're learning about what happens when societies fracture, when propaganda replaces truth, when ordinary people make extraordinary choices, both terrible and heroic. Students noticed that Miss Kovač taught certain topics differently than other history teachers. When discussing war crimes, international law, and justice mechanisms, she spoke with the precision of someone who understood these concepts from direct experience, not textbooks. How do we define crimes against humanity? A student asked during a unit on international law. By what they destroy, Miss Kovač answered. Not just lives but the fabric of human dignity itself, by actions so severe that they concern all of humanity, not just one nation. Her answers were always like that, specific, nuanced, coming from someplace deeper than academic study. Professor Michael Torres from the University of Washington Law School had been invited to give a guest lecture at Lincoln High about international criminal law. Afterward, he stayed to observe Miss Kovač's class. What he witnessed surprised him. Elena didn't just teach about the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, she explained its procedural rules, evidentiary standards, and legal precedents with the fluency of someone who'd worked within the system. Ms. Kovač, your understanding of tribunal procedures is remarkably detailed, Michael noted after class. Most history teachers present simplified versions. You're teaching actual prosecutorial strategy. I believe students deserve accuracy, Elena said carefully, especially about justice mechanisms, but Michael wasn't satisfied. During the lecture, Elena had made several references to specific cases, trial challenges, and legal innovations that weren't common knowledge even among international law scholars. You referenced the Tadić decision's significance for command responsibility, Michael pressed. That's not in high school textbooks. Where did you study international criminal law? Elena was quiet for a moment. I've done extensive reading on the subject. Reading doesn't give you the kind of insider perspective you demonstrated. You talked about prosecutorial challenges like someone who'd experienced them firsthand. Elena's expression shifted slightly. Professor Torres, I teach history. That's all you need to know. But Michael had worked in international law long enough to recognize expertise when he saw it. Elena Kovač wasn't just knowledgeable about war crimes prosecution. She understood it from the inside. The University of Washington's Digital Humanities Lab had developed an AI system for analyzing teaching methodologies and identifying expertise patterns in educational content. The program could detect when instructors were teaching from direct experience versus textbook knowledge. Professor Torres, intrigued by Elena's unusual expertise, uploaded recordings of her lectures, with her permission, ostensibly for teaching quality research, to the AI analysis system. What the AI found was extraordinary. Elena's teaching patterns showed characteristics consistent with legal professional experience. Her explanation structures matched those of trained prosecutors. Her case study analysis revealed familiarity with trial procedures that suggested direct courtroom participation. But here's what caught the AI's attention. cross-referencing Elena's speech patterns and specialized vocabulary with databases of international legal proceedings revealed matches to transcripts from the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia in the late 1990s and early 2000s. The system identified linguistic markers, legal terminology usage, and case-specific knowledge that appeared in tribunal records under the name Elena Kovačević, one of the most successful prosecutors in the tribunal's history. The AI had discovered something remarkable. The high school history teacher was the same Elena Kovačević who had prosecuted major war criminals and helped establish precedents that shaped modern international criminal law. Michael approached Elena carefully. If she was indeed the legendary prosecutor Kovačević, there were probably profound reasons why she'd left international law to teach high school students. "Elena, I need to show you something," he said, meeting her after school in her empty classroom. He showed her the AI analysis results, the teaching pattern matches, the linguistic markers, the connection to tribunal transcripts. Elena looked at the screen for a long time without speaking. "Elena Kovačević," Michael said quietly, lead prosecutor in the Mladić case, the Karadzic prosecution team, 12 successful convictions for crimes against humanity. You helped write the legal framework for modern war crimes prosecution. Elena nodded slowly. That was a different life. You were one of the most respected prosecutors at the tribunal. You helped bring justice to thousands of victims. Why did you leave? Elena was quiet for several minutes, looking around her classroom, the maps on the walls, the student essays waiting to be graded, the lesson plans for tomorrow's classes. Because prosecution was about the past, she said finally. Teaching is about the future. Elena's story emerged slowly. She'd been recruited to the tribunal in 1997, a young prosecutor from Bosnia who'd survived the war and was determined to ensure accountability for the atrocities she'd witnessed. "I spent 8 years prosecuting war criminals," Elena explained, building cases against people who'd ordered massacres, organized ethnic cleansing, destroyed entire communities. We won most of our cases, groundbreaking legal precedents, historic convictions, but the work had been emotionally devastating. Elena had reviewed evidence of horrific crimes, interviewed traumatized witnesses, listened to testimony that would haunt anyone with a conscience. "The day I decided to leave was after the Srebrenica genocide trial verdict," Elena continued. "We'd secured convictions, life sentences for the architects of the massacre. It was a huge victory for international justice. So why leave? Because after the verdict, I was sitting in my office, surrounded by case files, and I realized something. We'd brought justice for crimes that had already happened, but we hadn't prevented anything. New conflicts were already starting, and a new generation would grow up without understanding how these atrocities become possible." Elena had recognized that prosecuting war criminals, while necessary, was reactive. She wanted to be proactive, to educate young people about how societies fracture, how propaganda works, how ordinary people can be manipulated into supporting or committing atrocities. "I realized I could spend my career prosecuting criminals or preventing the next generation from creating them. I chose prevention." Elena's approach to teaching history was shaped by her experience at the tribunal. She didn't just teach what happened, she taught how it happened, why people made the choices they did, and how students today could recognize warning signs. "When we study the Yugoslav wars," she told her students, "we're not learning about something foreign and distant. We're learning about propaganda techniques that still work today, about ethnic manipulation that social media amplifies, about how democracies can collapse when people stop believing in shared truth." Her lessons included media literacy, critical thinking about political rhetoric, and understanding how human rights violations escalate from discriminatory speech to violence. "Ms. Kovač teaches history like it's a survival skill," one student observed, "like she's warning us about dangers we need to recognize." That's exactly what Elena was doing. Every lesson about past atrocities included connections to contemporary warning signs. Every discussion of war crimes included analysis of how they became possible through incremental normalization of hate. "The tribunal taught me that justice comes too late," Elena explained to Professor Torres. "By the time we're prosecuting war criminals, thousands of people have already suffered. Real prevention means teaching people to recognize and resist the social conditions that make atrocities possible." Word of Elena's true identity spread carefully through Seattle's legal and academic communities. Not as gossip, but as recognition of someone whose expertise had been serving society in unexpected ways. Law professors who'd cited Kovačević's prosecution work discovered that the legendary prosecutor had been teaching high school students for 2 decades. Human rights organizations realized that one of their field's pioneers was quietly training the next generation of advocates. Lincoln High offered Elena opportunities to lecture at universities, consult on international cases, and return to high-profile legal work. She declined most of them. "I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be," Elena said. "These students will become voters, leaders, citizens. What I teach them about recognizing authoritarianism, resisting propaganda, and standing up for human dignity matters more than any trial I could prosecute." But Elena did agree to one project, developing a curriculum on genocide prevention and human rights that could be used in high schools nationwide. Her unique combination of legal expertise and teaching experience made her perfectly suited to translate complex international law concepts into lessons that teenagers could understand and apply. "Young people need to understand that preventing atrocities is everyone's responsibility," Elena told curriculum developers. "Not just lawyers or soldiers or politicians. Every person who chooses truth over propaganda, dialogue over hate, human dignity over tribal loyalty." Today, Elena Kovač still teaches at Lincoln High School, but her influence extends far beyond Seattle. The genocide prevention curriculum she developed is used in schools across America and Europe, helping students understand both historical atrocities and contemporary warning signs. The AI system that discovered her identity has been adapted for use by educational institutions to identify and leverage hidden expertise among teaching staff. Her case showed that incredible specialized knowledge was being used to serve students in ways that traditional metrics couldn't measure. Elena's story changed how we think about expertise in education, noted an education policy researcher. The most qualified person to teach about international justice wasn't at a university. She was at a public high school, reaching the people who needed her knowledge most. Elena has consulted quietly on several war crimes cases, providing expertise to prosecutors while maintaining her teaching position. She's trained lawyers who've gone on to work at international tribunals, and her students have become human rights advocates, journalists who resist propaganda, and citizens who recognize authoritarianism's warning signs. But the work that matters most to Elena still happens in her classroom, where she helps teenagers understand that history isn't just about memorizing what happened, it's about learning to prevent it from happening again. "Every student I teach about genocide prevention, media manipulation, and human rights is a potential voice against the next atrocity," Elena reflects. "That's more powerful than any prosecution I conducted." The war crimes prosecutor who became a history teacher represents something important about expertise, mission, and the different ways to serve justice. Elena's story shows us that artificial intelligence isn't just about uncovering hidden talents or exposing secrets. Sometimes it's about recognizing that the most valuable expertise is often directed toward prevention rather than reaction, education rather than punishment. And sometimes the most important justice work isn't prosecuting criminals after atrocities occur. It's teaching young people to recognize and resist the conditions that make atrocities possible, ensuring that future generations understand the precious fragility of human rights and democratic norms, because the real victory against crimes against humanity isn't just punishing perpetrators, it's creating a generation that refuses to become them. So here's what I want to know. Have you ever had a teacher whose expertise seemed to come from somewhere deeper than textbooks? Someone who taught not just information but wisdom earned through experience? Share their stories in the comments below. Tell us about the educators who shaped how you see the world, who taught you to think critically, who prepared you for challenges you didn't even know existed. And if this story moved you, subscribe to AI Human Stories, because in a world where artificial intelligence can identify hidden expertise, the most important discoveries aren't about technology, they're about recognizing that the best teachers are often those who've lived the lessons they teach. That expertise serves society best when it prevents problems rather than just solving them, and that sometimes the most important justice work happens not in courtrooms but in classrooms. Until next time, remember, history isn't just what happened, it's a warning, a guide, and a responsibility.